Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on certification growth and marketing. I have with me marketing expert Amanda Crowley. We'll be talking a little bit about her new company and tips for growing certifications and communicating with your candidates. So thank you, Amanda, for joining us for this webinar.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nathan.
You're very welcome. It's always a pleasure to talk to you about marketing and certification. So let's start with a brief introduction. How did you get into the assessment industry? What was your path to get into this kind of niche industry that most people don't know exists when they're younger?
Yeah, my path is an interesting one. I feel like I'm sort of poster child when it comes to what your career can look like in assessment. And I don't say that in a like toot my horn type of way, but in my early 20s, I didn't go to college right away. I started working. I come from a middle-class, blue-collar family. They work very hard, but college was not something that was set up for me. And so when I was in my early 20s, I very specifically remember my mom being like, you need to get a real job. Like you can't keep just floating and bartending. Like you need to settle down and find something that really works for you. And I worked with a placement company, one of those job recruitments that placed me as a contractor at Prometric. So I started as a contractor. I worked operationally with events, what we call pop-up testing events, to get those set up and execute those for test day. So I've seen a lot in that time. Very quickly, I found myself invested in what we were doing, and I moved into account management. I spent 5 years in account management. Which I really loved. So I had a portfolio of clients that I was responsible for, from certification, licensure, a little bit of everything really I saw. So that took me there. Eventually I put myself through college. I got a degree in marketing. I moved into a marketing position where I could really grow and excel and create something that was mine. So the last 10 years has been real acceleration for me. I find that I really love the assessment and testing world because of the people. And you hear that, I'm sure, all the time, but I do feel like we are relationship based and the people are just really good. They're good people. So I've had a great career so far and I'm excited to see what else we can do.
Oh yeah, I've definitely found the same. I greatly enjoy going to conferences and just meeting with people, even if they're from competitor organizations, because they're just great people.
You do see that all the time. I think it is, people over competition, that really moves things forward. And you do see that at conferences, there's a lot of people that want to give back versus working against each other, which is nice.
Exactly. And I've met some people that tend to work against the competitors and are generally anxious about what the competitors are doing, but they tend to not last in the industry.
The saying, it's community over competition is the saying, and I really love that.
So what made you interested in marketing in particular?
Yeah, so towards the end of my time at Prometric, I was piloting a position. It was a growth, like program manager type of position. So we were doing work with programs, with test programs, but we were also sort of dabbling in sales and how can we grow those programs to make them, bigger, larger, more revenue, things like that. I saw the other side of sales, the side that is really intriguing and really fun for me. What I was doing was what we kind of call account-based marketing tactics. So you were finding very specific ways to connect with people, to figure out what their problems are and how you can solve them. And when you think of it in that mindset, that growth will come a little more naturally. It's not like selling directly, right? It's a little bit different. I fell really much in love with that side of things. I'm also really like competition. I'm just by nature, want to do well and want to win. That's sort of instilled in me. I like that stuff. So marketing gave me that outlet. I knew almost immediately when I started getting a taste of it that this is what I want to do. And where my value would be.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating, and there's so many ways that you can come into it too, with the storytelling side, the quantitative side, the technology side, and it's really trying to bring all that together.
I agree.
Yeah. So where'd you go after Prometric?
So I connected with just through networking through different conferences with some people at ITS, Internet Testing Systems. So I spent 5 years there. I was their first marketing hire. They actually did not have a marketing department when I started there. They were building off referrals, off of word of mouth, which is honestly one of the best ways to grow. But it was time for some very specific strategy to help them see the growth that they wanted in specific areas. So I came in, I helped build the department from the ground up, all sort of foundational things, from promoting them to a new website. We did a lot for events. I'm very proud of the growth that we saw over there at ITS. But after 5 years, it was time to make a change.
Yeah. So what inspired you to start your own company?
Motherhood. There's, being a mom has changed who I am to my core, right? If there are parents on here, they definitely know. And before I was a parent, I would have never understood it. But the moment that I had my daughter, what replayed in my head was I needed freedom. Like I really wanted the freedom to be able to be ambitious, but be a good mom and be present here at the household. And so, starting my own company gives me the best of both worlds, where I can be a mom first and a business owner second, and do all the things that I love. It's a really perfect fit. It was a seed that was planted, I want to say, well before I was even pregnant. I would get on calls with, testing programs or test vendors and help them navigate problems they were having, just because we're, like I said, we're friends, right? Community. And someone said to me, you could do that as a business. And ever since then, I thought to myself, yeah, actually, I think I could do that as a business. So we're taking a chance, and I'm very excited about it.
All right. Yeah, awesome, and congratulations. It's a wonderful endeavor and quite the adventure. Though every time I think about it, I think of a joke I saw when I first started out. I read it somewhere saying that people become an entrepreneur so that they have control over their working schedule and their flexibility. And somebody said, yeah, that's absolutely true. You can work whatever 20 hours of the day that you want.
Yeah, Yep, I felt that to my core. Before we started this webinar, right, I said to you, my daughter just went down for a nap, but like she's here all the time, right? So as I'm taking calls, there are times where she is here with me, and it is my new normal. And I'm leading with that narrative that I am a mother first, and then I'm a business owner. And it doesn't mean I'm deprioritizing my work by any means. It's just a different way to run a business where everyone understands and has the expectation that that does come first for me.
You're absolutely right, and I have the same priority with mine.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about your company, ACMC. What's your target market? What are the services you provide, and what are you trying to help solve?
Sure. So ACMC is a marketing consultancy. We will help really a broad range of areas. But for how we can work together, first and foremost, is we can do consulting. So you have a problem to solve, I can come in, help you build some frameworks and let you go at it. I can also help you hands-on, right? I can help you through that framework, do the actual work, let you focus on your job, and I can get that done for you. That's more of like project work with a start and end date. And then services, so monthly subscription type services that could be content writing, ghost writing, things like that. When it comes to marketing, my expertise is pretty wide. Like I mentioned, starting marketing department, you get familiar with a bunch of different areas, which really benefits me throughout the years because I've been able to really research and understand different avenues of marketing. But I can offer, content marketing, which is pretty broad as far as strategies to get in front of people, what content you're writing. People get stuck and frozen at this point. I feel like sometimes where they just don't know what to post. It's sort of when you sit down to write, an article or a blog, that blank screen can be very hard for people. But creating the strategy, writing, distribution, where do you post, how often do you post, where is it going, work through those things. Different other things that we would offer include website audits, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like and why that's important. So there's a lot that we could help with. The website goes live tomorrow. I'm very, very excited to share that with everyone so people can read through, what might be helpful for them.
Okay, wonderful. And I'll put that in the notes for the episode when we're publishing it.
So, I would say, Nathan, the important thing that I'm looking to do is provide people with some guidance, some small things that are very reasonable, very actionable, that can have big impacts for them. I don't want marketing to feel daunting to folks because, it is an area you can spend a lot of time in, and I know that you really enjoy it. You can really find yourself in a rabbit hole when it comes to marketing, and I want to just give people these easy lifts that they can see of results in.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. You can go down that rabbit hole and be like, I need to improve the internal linking in all the pages on my website, and I've got 100 pages. Like, you could spend several days on that.
Later, you've spent 3 hours doing one thing, and you're like, whoa. So, and then you have to prove that was actually even worth your time. So there's a lot there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that it's really important, like you said, to have that plan going into it. Like, and even the content marketing, you could go have Claude or ChatGPT come up with a list of keywords in your area, maybe write some blog posts. But unless you have that plan in place about, thinking about the network of terms you're trying to work with on your website and how to get it out, or are you publishing it on LinkedIn or Medium or something else? There's all these other things to consider.
I'm going to put the LinkedIn in the chat as well so that folks can see the website announcement that'll go out tomorrow. I'm just a day short of this webinar, so.
Okay, perfect. No worries. So do you have a specific target market that you'd like to work with in terms of helping with the marketing?
Test programs, but not specifically. It could be certification, licensure, associations, any of the likes. If you are offering a credential, that's really who I want to work with first and foremost. I feel passionate about, showing the world and showing everybody what the value of certification and credentialing is. We have a very important job of what we do in this industry, so I want to be able to promote that. But secondly, we have associations or membership associations. I'd love to work with those. That really helps support our community. And then of course we've got technology vendors too that I'm always happy to explore partnerships with.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and you're absolutely right that we serve an important purpose in society in terms of certification and credentialing and making sure that people are qualified to do the jobs that they're doing, and thereby serving the market, serving us. All right, let's get into the meat of our talk today and talk about the type of work that you do and how certifications and testing organizations can really drive growth and take their marketing to the next level. So first question I had was, how do credentialing orgs approach marketing currently, and how might they do it better?
One thing that I've seen frequently about how credentialing organizations approach marketing, and this is really broad, right? Because the way that you would approach marketing at a certification that's required or voluntary or a licensure that you really market totally different. That's maybe not even called marketing. Those are very different. So I do want to put that caveat up front that I do understand that. But in a general sense, I think that most rely on reactive or transactional type of marketing, which can be a little problematic. So think, my exam window is now opened. We need to send a blast email to all these folks to let them know. Right, that is super transactional. Some of that is definitely necessary, but I wouldn't mark it under that is marketing, right? That's just a notification. There is a difference. And the better approach to that is to be proactive, and it's to have a strategy in place. So when you think about what is a strategy, pre-test window. You need to build awareness before people are ready to test, and nurture them along the way. So there is a very standard foundational funnel in marketing, the marketing funnel, and I'll explain that a little bit for folks that just don't know anything about marketing. And you can Google it, like B2C marketing funnel, and you'll see a bunch of different images for this. It's a funnel. And at the top of it, you would have something that looks like awareness, conversion, activation, loyalty, and it goes through. So basically, you have the broad sense of, this is a candidate. Do they know who we are? Do they know what we do? And do they know why to choose us, right? This is very broad up here. And as they go through their journey, they're going to come down into the funnel, which is a conversion point at some point. And that conversion is usually they are signing up to test, right? That's usually the call to action. And then after that, you have them in your ecosystem, right? At the bottom, the loyalty part is recertification, which can be very tricky when it's voluntary, right? How do you keep them testing? How do you keep them in that world? How do you get them to promote it to their friends, word of mouth, say good things about you on the internet? There's a lot that happens within this funnel, and that takes strategy, right? When I talk through it like that, you can see how that is so much more different than sending out a blast email to folks that testing is open, come join us, right? Like, they speak differently when you think of it in that way. Marketing is not just promotion, it is positioning, it is messaging, it's understanding who your candidates are. And I mean, like, really getting what keeps them up at night. Because when you understand those problem points and what your certification can fix for them, or what your credential can fix for them, then you've got them hooked. You can actually talk to it. It's like speaking to a friend that has a problem. Like, you're really getting into it, right? But yeah, marketing is an investment, and that's when I think the biggest problem is that you should treat it like a business unit, and really be understanding about the long-term effects that it can have.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And marketers, have a term called demand gen, or demand generation, where they're trying to fill the top of that funnel by, increasing your brand, telling your story, getting people, basically on that email list, so that your email list is bigger when you send them out to send that your exam window is open, right? You want more people interested.
Demand gen is a great example. So, when you're looking at the funnel, and again, for anyone that's not familiar, just do a quick Google search, and you're going to get that photo that I keep throwing my hands out. But there are different parts of marketing, different strategies you can take through each part of the funnel to move people along, to get them to do what you want to do. And I know that seems kind of like chess in a way, but it is. You walk them through the process, and hopefully they will convert. And it happens time again when you set them up with a really basic story type framework. Here's the problem you're having. Here's the solution and outcomes. And you keep telling them over and over again, at the top of the funnel stage, that awareness, and you are very repetitive with it, and eventually they're going to come back to you.
Absolutely. So what does it really mean to treat a credential like a product, and how should that change the way we market it, and tactically what we're doing to this top of the funnel process?
It's interesting to call it a product. I actually don't love the way it makes me feel when we call it a product, but I do understand why. I think you have brought this question up to me, and I understand why it's important. So one, I'll say that I think what I'm reacting to when I have like that feeling of like, oh, product, is it sounds very salesy, and what we're doing is validating someone's knowledge and skills, and like, it's so important that watering it down to product feels kind of icky to me, and I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's not like we're selling a sweatband on Amazon, right, or something. Yeah.
Right. This is I very much value what we do, and it is very important. So, that's my caveat. But products are designed, and they're positioned, and they're sold with very clear value propositions in mind. So I think the credentials should too. There was a question in the chat that says, in terms of the value proposition, what other factors are equally important in a marketing plan? Okay, so maybe I'll answer that here somewhere. So we'll start with knowing your audience, right? and identifying who you're selling to, who is your target audience, and you might have more than one person that may fit that credential. I don't know that that's totally likely, and that's something that and you might be able to speak to that more, Nathan, than I can. When you're sitting down to create this credential, you do have a specific population in mind, right?
Yeah, that's usually the first thing you're doing, because the whole concept of exam validity is that the exam is built to meet a purpose. So the first thing you have to do is define what that purpose is.
Yeah. So some of this maybe is already defined for you. You have access to all that. So what I'm speaking is already existing. And then identify what makes your credential unique. And I do mean that in the marketplace. So do you have a competitor out there that is offering something similar? What are they offering? How are you different? How are you the better choice for them? Them being the test taker, and really get to know your competition, because when you take a look at what they're doing, what I like to do personally is, you do competitive analysis, and that could be a very simple SWOT analysis, nothing fancy. So strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, like fill out those buckets. It's something you can actually run through AI nowadays to say, write me a SWOT on XY company. It'll do it in a second. You don't even have to touch it anymore. But what you can do as the human in the process, right, is sit back and say, okay, here are the gaps. This is where we're better. And now we're going to talk about it. And there's just part of your content strategy right there, right? So the other thing about writing is to write about, sorry, now I'm distracted by the Q&A. Give me a second here. Is to write about the outcomes, right? And not just, I don't want to say, we're talking about product, right? Features, really, but the outcome of what the credential will bring. Let me read this question. An exam is something that is sold, has a price, and should meet all organizations' branding style and authoring guidelines as it represents and reflects upon the issuing organization. Oh, and that's just Joe. Yes. I definitely agree with you, Joe. Thank you for writing that. So I'm talking about outcomes, right? So it's not that just we offer a test and here it is. It's a credential that helps you, advance and stand out or unlock new opportunities, right? You were talking about how it benefits that candidate. I actually saw something on LinkedIn this morning that I wanted to share, and I'm just going to read off of the post. I screenshotted it. So Melissa Nosek is the CEO at Competency and Credentialing Institute, and she does a really good job of posting very frequently on LinkedIn. You can tell it's part of her strategy to promote the certification from a point of leadership, right? So she is giving her candidate base and those organizations that may get their staff certified access to her directly, which is a really smart idea. It also builds a lot of trust. So you'll see, her posting on a very consistent basis about why their certification is best, and that builds trust with their audience. But she had wrote on here, and I really love this, I'm just going to read it. Organizations understand that when certification becomes your guiding principle, everything else follows. Better patient outcomes, stronger team cohesion, and nurses who are empowered to be advocates for the highest standards of care. Like, these are 3 outcomes, like, chef kiss, like, I was reading this, like, do I need to get certified? And I'm not in healthcare. Yeah. So
yeah, it's so much more than just you'll earn 20% more if you're certified. It's
right.
A lot bigger.
That is the bigger picture. You're absolutely right. It's not that you're going to get promoted in 6 months. It's, this is highest standard of care. Like, that gives me chills. That's such a wonderful thing to write. So what Melissa's doing kind of falls under sort of, I wouldn't quite say influencer status, but it's very much leadership driven posting on a very consistent basis that's going to build that trust. And that's another strategy that people can take. When I mentioned ghostwriting, that's a service that I would offer where I could ghostwrite for someone like Melissa on a consistent basis. That's an easy lift that could help you long term.
Absolutely. I'd also like to note that what we're talking about here generalizes past the certification, but goes to other products that these orgs might offer, like online courses, practice tests, follow-up certificates, all these other things that help you expand your skill set and drive your career, right?
Yes, yep. My best friend works in HR, so she just got SHRM certified. But when she was going through her prep, for the exam, she had came to me and said, should I take the official prep course for SHRM, or should I take, I mean, you can take a million different type of practice tests or courses, and individuals, are out there just selling anything. They package it up, they brand it, they sell it, they make themselves look like they are the trusted source. And that does come back to the organization like SHRM, where they're very consistently marketing. Now, please don't get me wrong, because someone like SHRM has an incredible budget to do so, but they, they are able to say that we are the #1 source that most people are going to pass if they take our prep test. That's something that they are able to do. But yeah, I watched that lifetime with my best friend who just wasn't sure how to navigate that.
Yeah, that's a great example. Marketing plays such a big deal when you're talking about large markets like that. It's different for a certification niche that's doing 47 exams a year than it is for something like SHRM.
They are very different. And the things that I'm bringing with ACMC are definitely for those organizations that have not dedicated marketing resources, right? They have one marketer that is spread super thin across the organization, or they're a program that doesn't have a marketer, and you've got certification directors that are wearing all these hats and saying and screaming like, we have this great credential, but no one knows about it.
Yeah, exactly. And you're only doing 47 a year now, but with help from someone like you, it could be a lot more.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So where do most organizations get stuck when they're trying to get over this hump of realizing that they need marketing, where it can get them, and how to demonstrate ROI on getting marketing help?
Yeah, ROI is really hard. It's a tricky one, especially when you're not a marketer. When it comes to attributes, especially around digital marketing and like social media, that can be hard to prove. But let me step back a little bit. So, first and foremost, I find that a lot of organizations don't define what success looks like up front. And if you don't define those things, you don't know what success looks like. You don't know what those KPIs should be. And then you've done all of this marketing work and someone says to you, was it successful? And you don't know how to answer that because you never defined what success meant to you to begin with, right? And not all success is just a conversion and when I mean conversion, I mean candidates signing up or your registration enrollment numbers are improved. You may just be pushing forward your mission and vision as a company, right? Maybe that's the goal, is to get more people to understand what your organization does. But if you're not defining those moments, there's no way you can measure it. So I feel like everyone needs to take a step back and start there, essentially. Again, though, when it comes to marketing, there's a lot of nuance. Attributions can be really hard. And I say that because there's a term that we use in marketing called dark marketing, dark social, where you can't really track some stuff, right? So maybe I see a really great piece of content on Facebook, and then I send it to a friend via Messenger, and I say, look at this. And that is the hook that gets her to sign up for that exam, okay? Right, so we just have this path to where this person converted, but it's behind the scenes, and someone that's running a test program will never see that, and they can't track that, and they can't say that piece of content was super successful because X amount of people signed up off of it. So it does get tricky. And some of that I think you have to take with a grain of salt. But when it does come to ROI, there are definitely ways that you can track it, and you can prove its value. but you have to actually look at it. You have to understand the data, and you have to, be able to not just read it, but then say, how is this actionable? Because you have all this information. What are you going to actually do with it too is really important.
Yeah, you touched on another good topic there, and that is having multiple touch points. Because, like, again, we're not selling a simple thing on Amazon and somebody sees it on their Google search and immediately clicks and orders it. These are things where they might see an article on LinkedIn, they might see something shared on Facebook, they might see something discussed in an online forum. When you're talking about marketing for these types of products as a certification or a training course or something else, it's a lot more complex, isn't it?
It is complex. I had noted down in this conversation to talk about mapping out the candidate journey. And that's an exercise you could take on internally with a few people, in your organization, different SMEs, to sit down and say, how do our candidates come to us? And what are the steps that they're taking before they get into the exam, right? And when you map that out, what you're going to find is there are friction points, and those friction points mean that you're dropping people. People they've lost you, right? I actually, when I was on maternity leave, was going to take a certification test. And I'm not going to share like which one it was, but as I was going through the process, I found it very frustrating to understand what things qualified me to take the test. And how I would prepare for it. There was 2 points where I just could not find the information I needed, and after several attempts to find it, I gave up. I said,
Wow.
what, this is it. Yeah, I did because, I did think that it would add value to have, on my resume, I am certified in XYZ. But I couldn't get through the process, and it was so painful. I didn't have that time to spend trying to figure it out. But when you sit down and map it, those points would have been very clear. So, for example, if you go to the website and start clicking around, you find broken links, you find stuff that won't download. You're receiving emails that have very vague information. All of it are just their pain points. And when you start cleaning up those pain points, it can really, really help people. And again, I go back to to my guiding light is these are low effort things that can happen. You can spend a few hours in your day talking to other people in your organization and then go take the action, and they have real results that will actually help your enrollment rates. So.
And I suppose that's a good example of why you need to talk to the candidates and see what their experience is. Because, if they'd talked to, you're surely not the only one who went through that process.
Yeah.
They would realize this is a case. And it's also important to note why you really need a good candidate handbook, which is outside the scope of what we're talking about today. But having a good candidate handbook is essential for certification.
And those have changed a lot in the last 10 years that I've been in assessment. The candidate handbooks, I feel, continue to evolve, and they should. And what I mean is how you're writing, how you're communicating information, right, is continuing to evolve. And there are a lot of things you can do. And I think that goes into our next question. So if you...
Yes. So next question is, how can organizations improve communications with candidates and help them along this customer journey process?
Which I actually didn't even prep with this information, but there are different medias that you can take to communicate information. So yes, of course, a handbook is very important, and that is typically a lot of text. That is, text heavy, and you expect candidates to really understand all that information, which can be very overwhelming for people. But we are in the digital age where the access to information is immediate. People are expecting to be able to find that very quickly. So sharing things like videos, very short, 5-10 second videos. And it could be a screen grab of here's how you register for the exam, done, right? These are the things you can bring to a test center, done. Like I'm talking, take a look again at your pain points. Where in your survey results are you receiving the most complaints? Can you turn that into an opportunity to create content and get in front of it for the next test window. There are things like that that can be done, but you do have to start thinking differently about the way you put out information. Large blocks of text are not going to do it because they are not going to read it.
Yes, not anymore. People aren't going to read a 400-word email. That's for sure.
You have what I think it's down to 3 seconds now to grab attention. I mean, it's something wildly short. It's painful actually when you start thinking about how little time you have to get in front of someone.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the key touch points as we think about it in terms of those communications? Is it that top of the funnel piece, or how to improve the conversion rate, maybe get people sign up? Is it what is communications we provide to improve that conversion rate? Is it making clear the eligibility pathways like you encountered yourself, or are there other things that we should really evaluate that you would come in as a consultant to look at?
When we talk about communications, people usually think about emails, so we can start with email. Make sure that there are simple things you can do, right? First, use plain jargon. If I have to read one more long email that is stuffy and not like we speak to each other, I might lose my mind. Talk like your audience base talks. Find that tone of voice and stick to it. It's not about how I speak, it's about how our audience speaks, right? Get into that mindset and talk to them like they talk to each other. It can still sound professional and polished, good grammar and spelling, but don't use all this crazy jargon. Just talk to them and be direct. Write that email like you're talking to, face to face. You're on a call with a candidate. Like, speak like that and get into that mindset. And I promise you that shift is going to help when you're connecting with people via email. Make sure you have a clean sort of email template. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. In fact, I was just on a webinar the other day where they were talking about very basic like text emails are doing better than those really beautiful HTML ones, which I found very interesting. But it doesn't have to be anything overcomplicated. Just does it have a hierarchy of headers and sections that are make sense? If you're doing a lot of information, that is, right? Can you read it very clearly? I'd also say something I see is that there's too many communications being sent. And I wrote that for myself because that can also be painful when you start to inch into that spamming category. Are you sending too many? Can that information be concise? Can it be brought into one email? Things like that. And then you can start looking back at stats as well. What's performing? What content was interesting to people? If it performed well, can you repurpose that again? There was actually wrote this down somewhere else. The saying was create once, distribute forever. Where if you have a really great piece of content that performs really well, and this can be outside of email, this could be across any of your digital platforms, you can take pieces and repurpose that. So again, back to the low effort, big impact. And AI is really good with this now too. So, for example, you and I are on this webinar today where you're going to have an hour's worth of content. You run that through AI with a great prompt, and it will give you several different pieces of content. You may have a blog, 3 LinkedIn posts. Now you have transcripts for your website. You've got a ton of different content you can use. You don't want to post it and let it die, right? I think I went on a little bit of a far rabbit hole on that one, but
no, you're absolutely right on those. And the struggle is totally real when it comes to the content, because as a psychometrician, when I start writing, I naturally fall into let's write a dissertation on psychometrics type of language. And that's not what you want to be doing for marketing type content.
Different. They're just different. That's all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what are some easy lifts or changes programs can make immediately when we're talking about strategically thinking about marketing?
Sure. So some of this we've already talked about, which I'll just sort of reiterate for everyone. Audit your emails. Are they skimmable? Is the value clear? Are you sending too many or too little? I was reading the other day something about the reading level in the United States, and it was a lot lower than I would have expected. I think it was like in the elementary 5th grade level, which took me by surprise. Someone would have to fact check me somewhere but I did read, and the stat was definitely lower than I imagined. And I thought, man, how many communications or pieces of content do we put out that are not even like readable for people? People can't even digest it because they're not on that level. And that kind of goes back to your candidate base probably, or your population that you're talking to, but just an interesting, side piece there. Look at your data, try to make decisions off of what's working. If it doesn't work, stop doing it. There's a thing that I like to call the hamster wheel of marketing, that people don't get off of. It's like, we've always done it this way, now we're going to keep doing it. And that's a red flag. If the data is not supporting that this is a good piece of content or this is being successful, like, just stop doing it. Don't put your foot down.
Yeah, that's not just in marketing too. I can't tell you how many times I've heard we've always done it this way when it comes to running a business or a nonprofit.
I do hear it often too throughout my career. It's come up like, why do you do it that way? And we've always done it that way. Well, who started doing it that way? And tell them no more, like
Yes.
You can just stop. No is a full sentence. So you've got feedback, right? So here's really a great one, is that, I mean, you allured to this, was that you have candidate survey data. If you're putting out a survey, whether it's post-exam or, immediately post-exam, or it's by email, after they've tested, most folks are collecting information now. So you have all of this data. If you have a secure environment, you can run it through AI, depending on, the organization policy, which can give you insights. We're talking minutes. I mean, this isn't stuff that you're reading through anymore. This is minutes where, if you can use AI, it will tell you, here's the summary, here's the problems and the patterns, here's how I suggest to solve them, and here's a marketing plan that you can execute in the next, 6 months to fix it. The lift is much easier than it once was for some of that stuff.
Yeah, and if you're not using surveys, start using surveys, I suppose. And then,
is that a thing? So you tell me, are people not using surveys?
I don't see it all that often. Most of the surveys that I end up involved being used with certifications are job analysis surveys. But I'm also like trying to say, hey, let's add on other things onto this survey. Like, you've already got a captive audience. Let's add on a few questions on, like, would you take this certification? Are there other certifications in the field that you use? Thinking more strategically about your organization.
And that goes back to what your goals are, for your short-term and long-term goals. But a survey could be a really great tool. And we're talking, post-exam survey that might cut into some of the seat time, which I understand is a cost thing. But you can also contact these folks after they're done testing, after their test day has come and gone. How was your experience? What things were just like not working? What things did you love? And you would craft these questions with someone like you, Nathan, that is, very smart in asking questions. But there's a way to ask them where you can get the information that you need to make good decisions, data-informed decisions,
Yeah, and I think using them, these surveys up front too. So when we're talking about the top of the funnel stuff before, getting people just coming into your website, getting on your email list, send them out emails, even if it's just like a 3-question survey saying, what are the biggest problems in advancing your career or something like that, and start trying to get some feedback and run it through AI, like you said.
And then I see it a lot on some of the other social, like, Facebook, Instagram. Influencers do this a lot. Well, they'll post polls and they'll poll their audience directly to ask, what do you want from me? Do you like this content? What more do you want to see? Like they just interact with their audience in a way that is different than what we're used to on this business side, but it doesn't mean that that's a barrier that you can't test out and try. Talk to your audience and get that information, because you're right. If you're asking it at the top of the funnel, that's going to make it coming down into the conversion so much easier.
Yeah, and you don't have to be an influencer with capital I, like those Instagram influencers. Like that CEO of the certification group you talked about earlier is a great example. She's posting really good content like that, but she could also be posting surveys, getting input from her potential base.
Absolutely. That access to someone like Melissa, who is CEO of that organization, of a prominent nursing certification, there are people in her community that are vocal, that want to give their feedback. They want people to hear them. And now they have access to send her a DM and say, hey, this really isn't working. What do you think? What a valuable piece of information that gives her.
Yeah, because in her type of role, there could be things that she's not aware of, like maybe legislation in certain states, or, who even knows that unless somebody gets in contact with her like that, it's not going to be on her radar.
I definitely agree with you.
All right. Well, so what are some marketing pitfalls that can happen as organizations try to market their certifications or other types of credentials?
I'm going to start with one of my favorite things right now, and it is called the Story Brand Framework. It's by Donald Miller. He is a really great marketer. Have you read this book? You're shaking your head. You have.
Yes.
I just reread it during nap time because it's one of my favorite. And so I'm kind of high on that right now. But what it says is, make them your hero. We are not the hero. They are the hero. We are the guide. So basically, your candidate, or whoever's taking your test taker, right, for a more generic term, is the hero. And us as the organization, a credentialing organization, is the guide, right? So you have someone like Luke Skywalker, right? He is the main character on a journey to discover his purpose, save the galaxy. He is the hero of the story, right? And then you have someone like Obi-Wan Kenobi. What does my husband call him? The Forest Ghost or something like that.
Yes.
He provides the wisdom. He provides the training, the encouragement. He helps Luke, right? He is Luke's guide. You as the organization is the guide. You are the guide. You are not the hero. And this becomes confusing to people because they're like, but wait, I'm solving a problem. I'm the hero in the story. Like, no, you're not. The hero is the candidate. They are the one that is on the journey. They are doing something to better their life, whether, it's move forward in their career, validate that knowledge, that is their journey, and you are guiding them along that way. And I swear, when you start thinking about marketing in that way, it changes your narrative. It changes the way that you talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we really are touching people's individual lives by providing credentials.
It's life-changing. It is life-changing. Like that's the full sentence. And what we're doing is really powerful. So I think that taking yourself out of it and putting yourself in the candidate's shoes is really important when you talk about your credential. Few other downfalls we have: relying on one channel too heavily. I was Instagram for a while. Oh no, it was TikTok. Sorry. TikTok, went offline, right? That was, you couldn't download it anymore. And that, I don't know how long that lasted. Fun fact, I don't have TikTok. I've never downloaded it. That is like way off my radar. So as a consultant, I don't know what to tell you about TikTok. And I feel like maybe I should download it for the research of like just knowing, but I can't get myself to do it. Anyways, that's a side story. But TikTok went offline, right? It was not available in the App Store, yada yada. And you had so many influencers that that was their career. That was their money. That's how they made money. And because they only had that one setup on one platform, they didn't have a revenue income anymore.
Mhm.
That was scary for people. What I saw anyway was people trying to join other platforms, Instagram, Facebook, what have you, and monetize on those and say, sign up for my email list. Like, you're not going to see me on TikTok anymore. Like, and they were scattered. They were trying to figure it out very quickly. Don't ignore channels. Figure out where your audience lives. Beat one them. Reddit is really hot right now. So I do want to just plug Reddit. It's something that I keep reading about. A lot of marketers are in a position right now where they're figuring out, similar to SEO, how to get your content into AI. Folks that are using AI for suggestions, it's actually still a really small percentage of the population, but it will continue to grow very quickly over the next few years. And I'm speaking about just simple searches, what certification do I get for marketing? What is AI giving me? Is your credential showing up in AI? And people are trying to figure out how to get there. There's a lot of different talk about that right now in marketing. The path isn't totally clear, so that's fun. But what I have learned is that being authentic in the content you're writing can really help you get into the AI. And that's why I brought up Reddit, because circling all the way back around to Reddit is that you have real people that are writing and sharing in forums, and that information is showing up in AI. So what I would suggest for organizations is to monitor different forums in Reddit. If your brand is already in there, you can talk to your candidates, create an account, talk to them. You can be transparent, that your handle can show that you're with the organization, give that information. But those type of channels where you have people that are speaking on your behalf and creating a narrative for your program, they're going to continue to feed into the AI system. So that's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, you have two good points in there that I'd just like to reiterate myself. One is the meeting the candidates where they are, or your customers where they are. Some might be on LinkedIn, some might be on Instagram or TikTok or even Pinterest still these days, but some might still be going to in-person conferences, and you need to know if that's the case in your field. And if you're managing a certification program, you probably know better than anybody else, but you need to evaluate that when you're talking about evaluating marketing. And secondly, I agree with you about Reddit and also other related platforms like Quora or Medium, because I read that Google is overweighting Reddit these days, and it's definitely a large part of the corpus that goes into the LLMs. And Reddit is free to use, so you could definitely go on, and if you're involved with certification, go get in discussions on Reddit about your field, even if it's a tangential passages in Reddit.
And if your brand doesn't have a subreddit yet, so that's the forum, create one, because then you own it and you have more control over it. Don't leave it up to the masses to create and control your narrative. That is very hard to come back from.
Oh, yeah, that's a fantastic example. If you're doing certified widget makers, go make a certified widget makers subreddit, and then you control that, and don't let other people go in there and start one and complain about the test.
100%, and that's if that already exists, it might already exist. But you can create your own username and handle on behalf of your organization and start talking to candidates. Community management is something that I also would offer at ACMC. So, people that don't have time to sit in these chat rooms and communicate back and forth. And it might be simply pointing them back to the correct information. When I talked about how I was trying to take that certification and sign up for it, I was reading through some of the Reddit forums. And it would have been so helpful when I posted a question to have someone from that organization say, this information is here. I'm sorry, it's a little hidden. Here's the link, and I might have ended up taking that test.
Yes. Yeah. And that would have been a 30-second investment on the part of the organization. Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah. And then lastly, like I mentioned before, that hamster wheel of marketing, don't skip strategy. make sure that the tactics you're taking align to your goals. Random acts of marketing are not going to move things forward for you. Just make sure that they connect back to what you actually want.
You're totally right on that. You think about the big picture.
So we have do we have any more questions? We do have a few Q&A in here.
Yeah, one was talking about the grade level, repeats you. One asks you to give Melissa's full name so you can follow her example or follow her on LinkedIn.
Yes, I will put her in here right now. And then Dean, 34% of Americans are at a grade 7-8 elementary level. 36% are at a intermediate, slightly better. See, grade 7 to 8 is not what I would have expected. I don't know why I had assumed that it would just be higher. But if you think about that, 34%, when you're writing an email, you know, what does your candidate base look like? And not just email, right? You've got long form content, blog posts, webinars. I mean, if you go really into it, your website content, is it at a level that people can consume and digest really easy, you know?
And I definitely think of your target market there. But if a graduate degree is a requirement to get into your field, that totally changes the type of content you can be producing.
There you go. That's a perfect example.
And then he asked a question about, is it Fallon or Cloran's story brand framework or Park Howell's story cycle?
It's by Donald Miller, and I can put that in the chat too. He actually offers a certification on this framework, which is a whole other story for another time.
Yes, he's definitely thinking of productization.
Yes, he is. Yeah, he sure is. Any other questions? We have some great questions.
I don't think so. We're to the end of the hour here. So we've definitely got some fantastic actionable content from you. I hope there's a lot of value received by the listeners here and the future video watchers. If anybody wants to get in touch with you and learn more about how you can help them improve their marketing and grow their certification, what should they do?
An email. It's helloacmc@gmail.com. I put it in the chat. Follow me on LinkedIn. The website goes live tomorrow. You can also just connect with me, Amanda Crowley, on LinkedIn. I'm happy to be connected.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, Amanda, for joining us today and providing all of this wonderful insight on growth for certification organizations. I just want to reiterate that it's been fantastic content, and it's always a joy to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Nathan. I'll talk to everyone soon.
Thank you to all the attendees as well, and we'll see you around and see you in the next webinar. Bye.
Bye, everyone.